Yeah. All right, I'd like to do a very short presentation. It's the case of the missing resources, and I'll just take you through a little bit of a couple of projects that we've been working on at the Neuro Science Information Framework, which impacts publishing, or at least it impacts a lot of science. And so, that way, got it, okay. Sorry, there's a camera. Right where you're going to be. Okay, so if you could advance the slide, or can I advance the slide? All right, so a little bit of history. Is the Neuroscience Information Framework is this web inventory of over 200 databases that we've pulled together from all sorts of different locations. All of these are public databases, and we have been asked to do various things with that data. Of course, we've brought together the grants as well. So one of the things that we were asked to do by the funding agencies is the following thing, which occurred to some of our program officers. And program officer basically had been frustrated in the past as a scientist tracking down research resources, because apparently it takes a tremendous amount of time, and we know this from our time at the bench. I spent some time at the bench. I know this as a first-hand set of frustration for most scientists. What they're looking for in the paper is not necessarily anything that the authors thought or anything that the authors really said, is what they did. And what they did is the primary reason why a lot of especially incoming researchers go into the publications. They read the methods. The methods are of primary importance. So, how much time do these researchers actually spend tracking down antibodies? Tremendous amounts, weeks. Weeks of research, going through publication after publication after publication. And it does seem like a waste of time should these people be studying the brain, presumably. So it's a task that was theoretically very good for robots. Because we built some robots, we were asked to build one. Now this is a typical method section. Pathology component of a very typical method section. This actually comes out of my old lab at Stanford. And so I know these people, so they won't be offended. Now, believe it or not, this is a beautiful, very well structured, incredibly, to the letter, following the instructions to authors kind of a method section. You notice that the primary antibody against glial fibrillary acidic protein, GFAP, which is polyclonal, that's the dilution, was purchased from Millipore in Temecula. Fabulous. So are these people going to then call up the company, call up the phone directory in Temecula to figure out where this company is that purchased that antibody? No. It turns out that Millipore, and almost everybody else in the world now, including, I read on the airplane, high fashion companies also. They do this, they now have websites. So if you want your Gucci bag, apparently, on the airplane, I found out, and now you can get one online. But you can certainly get antibodies. Okay? So these antibodies, there is, if you go to the product catalog, and this is the page of Millipore that I accessed in 2010, this is a month after the article was published, you notice that there are 40 antibodies with the description of GFAP. And over the next couple of years, what happens is that Millipore was actually bought up by EMD, and now, when I access this this month, now there are 51 antibodies in the Millipore catalog. So, what does a researcher do? Well, a researcher goes and tells his students, his postdocs, his graduate students, whoever is around, to go and find and track down which antibody it was, which is not easy. And when I look at a picture like this, I don't think that this is just a pretty river flowing around a rock. I think of this as the literature. That is the literature because it is a point of fact. It is a stable, steady component. It will stay this way forever. it's the PDF, right? Or if you really want to actually print it out, it's the paper thing, right? And this is the internet. The internet is a river. Just because you go to google.com and you search the same thing doesn't mean that it's the same thing that was there yesterday. Actually, Google updates its indices about every 2 days. So the internet that you saw 2 days ago is not the same internet today. In fact, page rankings change. You might Google yourself once in a while. What comes back will change, and it will change back drastically. Okay. So the classes of problems that we ran into when we started this little project were classes of problems dealing with insufficient data. Most publications had insufficient data in the methods to actually identify the review. There's a time dependency. So of these 40 antibodies listed, 1 month after the publication on the producer's website, which ones were there when the person actually went in more than a year prior to publication in most cases? How many of those 40 were there? Were there 50 at the time? We have no idea. We cannot track this down. There's vendor transitions also, as it demonstrated. In our very brief survey to start this project, or end it, however you like to say, we looked at a Journal of Neuroscience, 1 volume of the Journal of Neuroscience, about 8 articles, 95 unique antibodies. 52 didn't contain enough information to determine what the catalog number could potentially be. Only about 10% actually contained the catalog number. A few of these antibodies were identified with either a clone number, which is not a unique identifier, or a catalog number. The supplier and the city and state where they were was almost always fixed. Now, this is really unacceptable in science. Okay. So we didn't bother asking the robot or training the robot to try to do this. Okay. So really, the way that we solve this problem is not to go forward and try to train really great robots, because if we can't do this, the robots really cannot do it either. And our solution became, well, let's see if we can do something a little bit different. So what we did is, like in the background here, we smelled in his, and his hoards of treasure. We actually created hoards of antibodies. And we went to all of the producers of the antibodies, and we tried to grab all of the data that they had. And we did. So we have about 2.2 something billion antibodies at this point. We've assigned them unique identifiers. And you can actually access each of the unique identifiers by using the URL. So we keep these things. We try to keep them stable over the years. We try to resolve these identifiers with this registry.org / the antibody ID. That is guaranteed to work no matter what we do with the website. We can consolidate these antibodies because actually antibodies get bought and sold by different companies. Believe it or not, we can keep track of those. And now we would like to ask authors to use them in papers, because tracking down an antibody shouldn't be that hard. Okay. We also created a nice new effects. And for some antibodies, as we've been working very closely with the Journal of Comparative Neurology, we're starting to get these nice references for some of the antibodies, but not for others. I won't show you all the numbers in the plots. Instead, I'll show you. Being librarians, I'm sorry. So, how do we ask authors to change their ways? Anyone got any ideas? Seems like a pretty good group. Oh, so you're seeing ahead. All right, so in fact, that's a really good idea. Let me show you how that happens. All right, no, that's great. All right, so this is a few numbers of about here 4,000 commercial antibodies that were identified in the Journal of Comparative Neurology. Journal of Comparative Neurology is a Wiley journal. It has a head editor by the name of Cliff Saper. Cliff has been an anatomist for many, many, many years, one of those old guys that points to all the little notes. But he is a fantastic, fantastic researcher and has been absolutely burned by antibodies as a reagent. So when he became the head editor of the Journal of Comparative Neurology, he cracked the whip and said, thou shalt not publish unless thou does proper identification of these reagents, and he did. And you notice that compared to the Journal of Neuroscience, which had about 13% catalog numbers in our sample and 6% for that one, he gets about 92% catalog numbers for commercial antibodies. So coincidentally, the lowest retraction rate. Okay. Is this problem just dealing with antibodies? Now, I've only talked about antibodies, but it's only one out of many different reagents and that are inside of methods. And so there are other resource types. There are organisms, there are cell lines, there are constructs, knockdown reagents. And for this study by a couple of colleagues of ours that came out just last year, we actually looked at all of these different reagents and see that the problem across both disciplines and across reagents is very, very dire. Okay? So what we're having is, at least in neuroscience, which some of you work with here, we see that in terms of constructs, the identifiability of these reagents is extremely low. Organisms, actually, across different disciplines is pretty good, but neuroscience is really bad. We as neuroscience have some place to improve. In any case, antibodies are pretty much generally bad. Identifiability was less than, or roughly around 50% across the different disciplines. And by the way, this didn't, it didn't matter the impact factor in this paper. It didn't matter, you know, how stringent the instructions that authors were. Generally speaking, it seemed to be editor involvement actually that changed any of this. So, are we doomed? Like the Statue of Liberty in all films doing the end of the world. Well, let me introduce you guys to the Urban Lab. The Urban Lab is a great lab. It's a standard lab. Now lots of people, lots of graduate students. Here are the Urban Lab antibodies. Do you recognize anything? So lovely spreadsheet. Lovely spreadsheet. They tell you when they bought it, where it's being kept. They have the catalog numbers. They have the lot numbers. This is a very organized lab. But now, if we look at their publications, the Urban Lab publications do as poor a job as anybody else in terms of identifying these reagents that they keep track of so cleverly. So what can we learn from this? It looks like authors and scientists either are schizophrenic or they're potentially not the same people. Or maybe both. Who knows? All right. But they don't think about reagent provenance when they go into the mode of I'm going to publish a paper. They actually don't think about provenance at all. They have something else that they're worried about. They're worried about impressing their colleagues and everything else. So we're asking gentle reminders may be a way to kind of solve problems. Okay. So in 2012, we got a group of about 25 journal editors together. The INCF, which is the International Neuroinformatics Coordinating Facility, say that 3 times faster, actually paid for a really nice dinner, so they showed up. That was good. So they showed up, and what essentially came out of that meeting, and there were some, there were some kind of big names in there. Nature was there, all of the big neuroscience publications were there. What we wanted coming out of this were that resources should be machine readable, They would be outside, they would be available outside of the paywall, and that there would be uniform access across publishers and journals. And those are huge. I know they're a very tall order, but we have some ideas from Elsevier and from others of how to actually do that without changing your entire publication process, all of your infrastructure, to be able to accomplish this. So the current work with the resource identification in neuroscience literature group is that we've established the group. We are starting to make we have started to make all of these identifiers available. I showed you with the antibody registry. So for antibodies, we have this. For organisms, we have this. We've gotten buy-in from 5 of the major model organism communities, which, again, organisms were a really big problem identified by that paper. And we also have software, scientific software tools and databases. Those are all now key on these unique identifiers. There's a single website. You can check that out, SciCrunch/resources, where we've brought together these data into one place where an author can go in, type in their tool, and find it. Type in their antibody and find it. We have prepared instructions to authors. We've prepared letters, and those are all available on the site with the working group. And we're still kind of in progress, testing everything, performing some usability studies. Okay, this is the working group, and there's Martin's picture. So the projected launch, which was actually in the 2013 follow-on to the original meeting, that follow-on was actually wasn't catered with a big dinner, so only the publishers showed up. It was at the Society for Neuroscience meeting and this last year in November, and the publishers maybe said, okay, we can implement something. What we could do is we can start this in February. I think that was the idea. All right, so what we have in terms of this pilot project to get resources identified is we have, we originally got 25 journals. We are starting to bring on some more from these 4 publishers with one set of author guidelines. This will be potentially very huge. There's a press release from Elsevier, and believe it or not, we actually even got the Wall Street Journals. Fun. Now, how can any of you help? I would love for you all to join this effort, endorse, send your authors our way to find their identifiers. Anita, the board actually from Elsevier Labs came up with a brilliant idea of how to put these things outside of the paywall without changing anything on your back ends. It's just to put these identifiers as keywords. Keywords which are actually never consistently used. So if they become keywords, then any search on PubMed will actually be able to bring them back. Instructions to authors and sample letters are also available. These things have been written, they've been vetted. And that is roughly, I think my comment. I don't know. Those are kind of good. So, please ask me questions. Yeah.
For the benefit of those people, for the benefit of those people who are not involved, might you say something